The next subheading was
manners of sitting the lesson of scholars.
learning,
Learning from the manners of the scholars.
learning from the manners of the scholars. There are many ahadith, there are many athar, narrations from the early generations that discussed the importance of learning manners. And sometimes the fact that they used to learn manners before knowledge, or they spent X amount of years learning manners and X amount of years learning knowledge, and if they could have taken some of the time for knowledge into manners, they would have done so. So when we say learning manners, I mean two things. Number one, learning them as in seeing and learning what the manners are. And number two, learning to have those manners. They're two separate things. Learning and seeing those manners, so you learn what the manners are. And number two, learning to implement them, i.e. practically doing it yourself. That is a learning curve in and of itself. So for example, learning what patience is, seen on your teacher, learning patience is to withhold or refrain for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you see what it means. It can apply to keeping away from haram, it can apply to doing the wajib, it can apply to the qadr that occurs, and so forth. You're learning. Another way of learning is you learning to be patient. So now when something happens to you, you're practically learning. Now in this moment I have to be patient. And it's at the start, it's not just after I've calmed down, but it's at the strike of the moment. And as you grow and you experience more, you should find yourself learning these manners, i.e. practically implementing these manners more and more and more and more. The earlier you start, then the more you will have practiced. And the easier, generally speaking, that it will get. Clear? Okay, so the first type is actually learning these manners. So number one, you learn these manners from the scholars in the lessons, i.e. by observing how the teacher is, the sheikh is, when he gives the lesson, and how he answers the questions, and how he corrects the people. So when you say that the Shaykh has patience, you see how is this patience? What is the form of that patience? When does he become patient in explaining something to someone that doesn't understand? And when does he stop because of the greater benefit of carrying on with the lesson? Looking at these things, how does he teach? What does he begin with? Because one of the things that we have an issue with is that students may know certain subjects, but they don't know how to teach it. And if you don't know how to teach it, which is another thing that Shaykh Al-Usaymi mentions in Ta'zim al-Ilm, or the Khulasa, is that the teacher has to know how to teach. Not just that he knows the knowledge, but he knows how to deliver that knowledge. And that's, in brackets we say, that's a separate thing. Because there are many people that can tell you what the Quran says in certain parts, and they may be able to recite it properly, and they may even know the theory behind it, but they may not be able to teach it. They don't know what to focus on at the start. If a student makes a mistake, they don't know which mistakes to correct first, and so forth. And that causes at times more harm, and it causes the student to not benefit. So one of the things, how to benefit from the lessons, one of the greatest benefits is when you're sitting with a scholar, especially a scholar that spent many years learning and teaching, is seeing how he teaches, seeing how he interacts with the people. When something goes wrong, how does he behave? That's in the lesson. And then the second aspect of that is outside the lesson. How is the Shaykh outside the lesson? So outside the lesson, the atmosphere is different. The people that he will interact with are not the same as students that come to the lesson and maybe in the masjid, so they will behave in a certain way. Outside the lesson, anyone may come up to him and discuss any issue with him and pull him in a certain direction. And these aspects then are of utmost importance because they give you a practical picture to the theoretical words that you see in books and you hear from teachers. They give you a practical picture of that. And having this companionship with a scholar is the thing that people most lack, that most people lack. And many of us can get information. We have internet, we have YouTube, you can download PDFs, you can download more books than some scholars 60, 70, 80, 100 years ago. They didn't have the books that we have, some of them. Because they didn't have Google, internet, printers, or they're not widespread like now. But one thing that you cannot get, or that is rare to get, you can get it, but you cannot get it without being with a scholar, is seeing this. Even if you say, I can see a video, in the video, it can be edited. An issue happens and it's edited out. A question comes that is loaded and the Shaykh answers in a certain way, but it's edited out. Or the camera is off, so you don't see how the Shaykh is after the camera. These are all aspects that if you can get time with the Shaykh outside of the classroom, then do it as much as you can. Because that's when you learn the practical aspects of manners. Not just the theory that many people will see, but the actual practical aspects. And when you see someone doing something, it's different to when you hear someone saying something. The Shaykh tell you something and you seen the Shaykh doing it, two different things. Doing it has more of an impact. It brings the words to life. The third subheading was manners in the lesson. Manners in the lesson. And this is connected to the first point where we mentioned that knowledge or learning is an act of worship. So, within the lesson then, the student should act as if he's in an act of worship, or she's in an act of worship. I do it with ihsan, do it properly, not do it half-heartedly. And what does that mean for a lesson? That means that the student should pay attention to what the teacher is saying by looking at the teacher. Are you not looking at the door, not looking at the window? Listening to the teacher carefully and noting key points, as well as other manners that we all know and adhere to generally. And the second point then is the opposite, is that means that if this is an act of worship, that the person should not turn away from the teacher, look around, unnecessarily move, talk without a necessity. So if we were to compare this learning, being in a classroom, in a circle of knowledge, with another act of worship, such as the salah, If someone was praying, where would they normally look, or where are they supposed to look?
So, sujood.
The place of sujood, or the other hand, the other point is the finger. When the tashahhud, they'll look at the finger. That's where they should look. They may look other places, but that's where they should look. So if you walk in and someone is praying, and when they hear the door open, they look at the door, what will you feel in your heart? That there's something missing from that person's prayer, or they're not fully focused. Their mind is not on where it's supposed to be. Likewise, if you see the student, or if us as students, when sitting in lesson and someone is talking to us, because when the teacher talks, he is addressing every individual. He's not talking as a group. He is addressing every individual. It's like you're having one-to-one conversation. So in that case, if you see the student, or if us as students, at times we hear something and we turn around, or we daydream and look around, then we know that that's not the proper etiquettes, that's not the proper manners in the lesson. And that's like the person who looks around in his salah. There's a part of the reward from the salah is being stolen from him. Likewise, part of the concentration in the class is stolen from the student who looks around and plays or turns around unnecessarily, or looks at his phone, or does other things that he or she does not need to do. Even if the teacher cannot see them. Like some sisters may be behind the curtain and they may talk to each other or whisper to each other, thinking that the teacher cannot see. But as we mentioned, this is not between the teacher. This is between the person and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not respecting the teacher, you're respecting the knowledge that is being shared in the classroom, and not the teacher as an individual, him or herself. So if a person does not have that manner with regards to the knowledge in the class and respecting the class, then Allah is not likely to give that person the knowledge that they are seeking, or may give it to them in a way that they not want it, that will not benefit them, or Allah may delay them in the knowledge that they may get. So then all these things that we've mentioned, what they should do and what they should not do, all come back to the fact that knowledge is an act of worship, and so needs to be done properly. Learning needs to be done properly and should not be done half-heartedly or in a way which is not appropriate. Fourth heading, subheading, was how to benefit from the lesson. How to benefit from the lesson. That was the fourth subheading. How to benefit from the lesson.